See, my dad was 53 years old when I was born.
He was?
Yeah. I think Mommy was about 17 years younger than
Yeah. He was married to that Lizzie for a while, wasn't he?
Yeah.
What'd you hear about her?
She'd take spells blacking out.
Blacking out?
Yeah. Fainting, you know.
Yeah.
And some of the older boys laid a dish rag on her face, said she was something like that.
She's just faking it, huh?
Yeah.
Her and your dad didn't get along too good, did they?
No, they didn't have no trouble. But she'd stay there a while and she'd pull out and leave and be gone for, she'd gone twice for a year at a time.
She was?
Before he ever stood for divorce.
Huh. He got tired of putting up with that.
Yeah.
Where was she from?
I don't know. She had people here, but I don't know where she was originally from. But she had relations in this part of the country.
Dixie Manning, the daughter of Charlie Porter, who was a son of Alick, said they called Lizzie Old Sweets.
Well, that was Grandpa's second wife. She was a Clay.
Yeah.
And I think she done a lot of commanding things. That was according to all the kids before, of course.
So Lizzie did a lot of that?
Huh?
His second wife did a lot of that?
Oh, yeah, she's one of those, the knocking spirit.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Really?
You know what they called her?
What?
Old Sweets. Of course, that first kids didn't think much of it. So I guess that's why she and Grandpa said that.
Sometime after this, things began to get heated between Alick and Lizzie's sister's family, the Clays, who were still neighbors. Alick's son Everett remembered going to Grayson, Kentucky with his dad when he was a boy so his dad could file an indictment against the Clays. They spent the night with Alick's brother-in-law, Fleming Lowe Brown. In Alick's second divorce case against Lizzie, one of the witnesses is her nephew, Dan Clay, and he talks about Alick trying to kill his brother by attempting to cut his throat, but he cut his vest shoulder strap instead. Harlan Porter, Alick's son, told a story in a 1981 interview about Mitchell Clay. He was about the same age as Alick's oldest son, Went Porter, and he was causing trouble up at Old Fairview Church. They said they were going to arrest him with a citizen's arrest, and Mitchell said there was not enough people there to do that. So Alick told Mitchell that he could arrest him in a second if he wanted to. Mitchell grabbed a big rock and he threw it at Alick. Harlan said if the rock had hit his dad, it would have killed him. But Alick ran under the rock with his knife blade open, and he cut Mitchell's breeches bib. Mitchell ran off the top of the hill holding his breeches up, and he didn't speak to Alick for 40 years. Even if he would meet him in the middle of the road, he would turn his head and ignore him. Alick was charged with breach of peace in 1907, but he was found not guilty by a jury of 12 men. The court case is incomplete, so it's not clear if this pertains to Alick's trouble with the Clays or another incident. About this same time, Alick Porter's brother-in-law, George Dwelly, came from Robertson County for an unannounced visit. It was getting dark when George arrived. He stood outside and he yelled, "Alick Porter, come out here!" And Alick did come out, but since he'd been having so much trouble with the Clays, he came out on the porch with his gun loaded. Alick took aim at the man standing on his fence, and Alick yelled, "Tell me your name or I'll shoot you off the fence." George Dwelly quickly yelled, "Don't shoot, Alick, it's George Dwelly, it's your brother-in-law, George Dwelly." In 1978, when I asked Everett Porter if his dad Alick was a good man, Everett said, "I couldn't brag about him being so good in his younger days. He drunk some liquor. Uncle Levi and Uncle Jim, they was whiskey drinkers." Everett Porter was 2 years old when his mom, Laura Fulton Porter, died in 1894. Everett was 4 years old when his dad, Alick, remarried to Lizzie. And Everett would have been 16 when his dad, Alick, and Lizzie's divorce was final. So Everett was able to share some first-hand details about his dad and Lizzie.
His third wife, your dad's third wife, Katie, she didn't like you guys very well?
No, we got along fine.
Yeah?
But we didn't get along with that second woman.
Oh.
She was from Missouri. You know, they say you have to cite them when they come from Missouri. Well, she stayed She has a family in Missouri,
Oh, she did.
Warrensburg, Missouri. And she stayed out there a heap of the time.
Who was?
That second woman, the dad married.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Liz Stewart, I don't know. Stewart might have been her maiden name.
So your dad and her got a divorce. Was it because of the kids? Or they just didn't get along very well either?
She stayed a year back then. One had to go away and stay a year before because he probably get divorced back then as it is now.
Oh, you had to be separated a year?
She'd stay 5 and 6 months and come back and all, be a big fella for a while. And then she'd take back out there. Hardly know when she'd leave until she was ready to go. And she stayed. She got her stay at, and that time she stayed a year, and he had him another one picked out. By that time, he called for a divorce and got it and married her, and right off of the reel. Married Kate. Kate was a good woman, I have to say that.
October 2nd, 1907, Alick Porter filed for divorce for the second time. He claimed that Lizzie abandoned him on September 13th, 1906. Alick stated that he always provided plenty for her and he did all that he could to make her contented and happy. But on the other hand, Lizzie would quarrel and she would fuss and make him unhappy and miserable, and she would break off and leave home and leave his home for months at a time, and finally, when on the 13th day of September, 1906, without any fault on his part or without him provoking her, she abandoned him and left his home and left the state of Kentucky, and she is now absent from there. Lizzie now lives in Warrensburg, Missouri, so Alick is asking for a divorce. A few weeks before this divorce suit was filed, Alick Porter wrote a letter to Lizzie's daughter, Pearl Tyler, and her husband, Sterling Tyler, in Missouri.
Jacobs, Kentucky, August the 21st, 1907. Dear Sterling and Pearl, Lizzie writes me that she wants to come home. You know how unpleasant life has been to us ever since we have been married. I told her if she ever went away any more without my consent, she would have to stay. I cannot, nor will I try to live with a woman that does as she does. Hope you will not let her come back any more. She would not stay if she was here. I have filed suit for divorce, which will be tried at the October term. I have sufficient grounds for divorce and can get it if she comes, but it will be very unpleasant to us both for her to be here during the suit. Yours respectfully, A.F. Porter.
In 1979, Alick and Katie's son Harlan Porter told me that when he was trying to get a divorce from Lizzie, he wrote her a letter and he told her to never come back. He said that if they could have produced that letter, that he could not have got the divorce. But his lawyers got that letter and it never was produced. This 1907 letter that he wrote to Lizzie's daughter was entered as evidence in the divorce case. It is not known if this is the same letter. Harlan did say that Lizzie about broke Alick up financially with the divorce. Even though Alick did not want Lizzie to show up for court, on October 2nd, 1907, she was summoned to appear within 30 days for court. In her counterclaim, dated October 16th of 1907, we finally get to hear Lizzie's side of the story.
I did not abandon Alick on September 13th, 1906. I am anxious and willing to live with Alick as his wife. It's not true that Alick did what he could to make me contented and happy. He was jealous, quarrelsome, and contentious, and at times did all he could to make me miserable. He was trying to persuade me to leave him. Laying aside all these faults, I am still willing and anxious to live with him. I didn't quarrel with Alick, or fuss with him and render him unhappy and miserable. I did not go away and leave his home for months at a time, except I did visit my children a few times who live in Missouri. But that it was always by the consent and advice of my husband that I made these visits, never with any intention of permanently separating myself from him or abandoning his house in any way. It is true that I started on one of these visits to my children in Missouri on or about the 13th day of September 1906, but it is untrue, and I deny that this was with any intention of abandoning Alick or our home. Alick was willing for me to go and went with me to the station on the railroad some miles from our home in the country, and he furnished me the money to pay my train fare. That it was by his full knowledge and consent, and after fully advising with him, that I started on this visit to see my children who live in Missouri, and that it was agreed that I was to stay until after Christmas and then return to our home. After I got to the home of my children, and at repeated times thereafter, I received letters from Alick telling me not to come back home, and stating to me that he would not live with me should I return, and it was for this reason I remained away from him. After receiving these letters from Alick, I repeatedly wrote him, requesting that he permit me to return to him. But when he did answer these letters at all, he always stated to me that he would never live with me again, or words to that effect. I was anxious and willing to return, but that it was the fault of Alick who had abandoned me, and his refusal to live with me that caused me to remain away from him and our home.
Lizzie went on to request $1,000 alimony. I can't blame Lizzie for going to visit her kids and grandkids in Missouri. Her son Harold had just graduated the class of 1906 at Columbia, Missouri University, and he was on his way to becoming an attorney. Liz had to be proud of him. Lizzie's daughter Pearl had just had her fourth child in April of 1906. No doubt she wanted to spend time with her grandkids also. The depositions for Alick and Lizzie's divorce case began more than 3 months later on January 27, 1908 at the Union Schoolhouse. 32-year-old Went Porter, Alick's oldest son, was the first witness. He agreed that Lizzie abandoned Alick on September 13th of 1906. Went testified that his dad was kind and affectionate toward Lizzie and provided plenty for her while they were together. 26-year-old son Millard Porter was the next witness. He concurred with his brother Went that Lizzie left on September 13th of 1906. She took all of her household and kitchen furniture with her, except what she afterwards ordered taken to her brother-in-law Isaac Clay's. It was fully understood that when Lizzie left, she was making a final separation from her husband and left against the will and consent of her husband A.F. Porter, and sold the cow and calf to get money to go on. She sold the cow and calf to her husband A.F. Porter. Lizzie then cross-examined Millard in person.
State what you ever heard me say to your father as quarreling with him.
You was jealous of him.
Did you ever hear me object to my husband going about except courting other women?
That was the biggest objection.
Who gave orders for my things to be moved away to Isaac Clay's?
You did yourself by letter.
Didn't Mr. Porter, my husband, send after Martha and Senia to help me get ready to go when I left?
He didn't send after Martha. I know for me and Martha was already there. I don't know whether he sent after Senia or not.
I will ask you to state whether I wrote to you and asked you to see my husband if he would let me come home.
She wrote me a letter and said, "Take it to my father and let him read it."
State whether you wrote me a letter stating that you had seen your father as I requested, and that he says that he will not live with you.
I will not.
I will ask you to state that whether you wrote to me that your father had broke up housekeeping and had rented his farm and was boarding with Wentz.
I have no recollection of it if I did.
19-year-old Charlie Porter was the last son to give his testimony that day. Charlie said that when Lizzie left, she took all her things except what she ordered taken to her brother-in-law Isaac Clay's. The defendant sold her cow and calf to her husband, A.F. Porter. Father did not furnish the defendant any money to go away, and the cow and calf was all the livestock that she had. It was fully understood at that time that when she left, she was making a final separation from her husband, which was against his will and consent. Lizzie was also allowed to cross-examine Charlie in person.
How much money did you ever know of your father giving me?
I don't know of him giving any money, but you always got whatever you called for.
State if I didn't make my own living.
No, I won't.
Did not I buy things with my own money for the table?
If you ever bought anything, I don't know anything of it.
Did not your father take mad spells and not use my things?
Yes, I have heard him say that he would not sit in your chairs, because you would not let any of his children sit in your chairs.
Nearly 3 months later, on April 17, 1908, Alick's 24-year-old Sam Porter gave his testimony in Olive Hill at the law office of Brown and Cassidy. The attorneys grilled Sam hard about land that Alick Porter had sold to Sam. They accused Sam of doing this so that Alick could avoid alimony. Sam claims that he paid his dad $250 for the property, but there was no deed, just an unrecorded bond. Sam testified that the farm is worth $500 or $600. Sam said that he was renting the farm back to his dad, who was renting it to his son Charlie Porter for $25 per year. Sam said that Lizzie was tending to flowers to sell to make money for her trips to see her children in Missouri and Arkansas. The attorney says that Lizzie only made 2 trips in 12 years, but Sam thinks she made 3 or 4 trips. Sam says that he lived with Alick and Lizzie for 9 years. Alick was always kind and affectionate toward Lizzie and provided plenty for her. The attorney showed the 1907 letter that Alick had written to Sterling and Pearl for Sam to verify that it was his dad's handwriting. Next, they called Dan Clay, Lizzie's nephew, for his deposition. Dan said that he knew Alick and Lizzie 10 or 12 years since he was a boy. He stayed at their house some, he worked there, he took his meals there. Lizzie was industrious, a good cook and housekeeper, and took good care of Alick's children. When cross-examined, Dan Clay stated that he had hard feelings toward Alick ever since he tried to kill his brother by attempting to cut his throat, and he cut his vest shoulder strap. Depositions resumed the next day with 48-year-old Charlie Jacobs, the postmaster of Jacobs, Kentucky. He states that Alick told him not to give him any more letters from Warrensburg, Missouri. A strange direction in the questioning revealed that while Lizzie was gone, Alick had not just been writing letters to Katie Pelfrey and Lizzie's daughter Pearl. A local resident of Jacobs, Kentucky, Betty Patton, requested in writing to the postmaster that he not give her any more letters from Alick Porter. The attorneys next deposed Betty Patton's 12-year-old daughter, Eddie Elam. "Do you know the plaintiff, Alick Porter?" "Yes, sir," she said. "I will ask you if after a short time the defendant Lizzie Porter left home and went away somewhere, while riding on Alick Porter's wagon, he sent word to your mother by you, and if so, what was it?" Eddie said, "This was about 2 years ago," and he said, "Tell your mother that if old Mart Patton left home, that someone loved her better in 5 minutes than Mart Patton did in 30 years. From these 2 depositions, it sounds to me like Alick Porter had his eye on Betty Patton for a while and was writing letters to her also. I speculate that he was considering Betty Patton as a candidate for his next wife, but his divorce from Lizzie came about 3 years too late." Who was Betty Patton? She was about 10 years younger than Alick Porter. She lived nearby. She was the widow of Meredith Elam, who had died a few years earlier, and Betty remarried Thomas Martin Patton March 26 of 1905. The next witness deposed was 34-year-old Katie Pelfrey, Alick Porter's 3rd wife-to-be. Katie testified that she told Alick 10 months earlier she would talk to him after he got his divorce. However, she admitted that they were engaged, providing that he gets his divorce. She stated that Alick had been a regular caller since late October or early November, a period of about 5 months. Katie said that Alick furnished her firewood and bought her little girl a pair of shoes for Christmas. The divorce between Alick and Lizzie was final on April 24, 1908. 2 days later, on April 26, 1908, 53-year-old Alick Porter and 34-year-old Katie Pelfrey were married. One last humorous detail about Lizzie from Irma Lewis, daughter of Went Porter, granddaughter of Alick.
She found out he was getting married. She come and tried to catch Grandpa, and he ran.
He ran from her.
I feel dead like about that. Yeah.
I have to believe that Lizzie was torn between her life in Kentucky with Alick Porter and her life with her children and grandchildren back in Missouri. In a 1979 phone call, Alick Porter's niece, Jewel Shanks, told me that Lizzie wrote a letter to her mother, Emily Baumgardner Porter, the wife of Reverend Steve Porter. They were living in Wisconsin at that time, and this was shortly after the divorce. Lizzie told Emily her former sister-in-law, "I'd rather be walking the hills of Kentucky with Alick in a calico dress than living where I'm living." In 1910, Lizzie was living with her son Harold and her sister in Kansas City, Missouri. Sadly, Lizzie's daughter Pearl died in February of 1910 with complications during childbirth. In 1920, Lizzie was living with a niece, Pearl Brown, and her family in Catlettsburg, Kentucky. Lizzie died in 1934, and she's buried in Sunset Hill Cemetery in Warrensburg, Missouri. Alick and Katie were married at Katie's home by Reverend John C. Porter, Alick's brother. Grant Pelfrey, brother to Katie's first husband, was one of the witnesses along with E.A. Purnell. Katie and her first husband, John D. Pelfrey, had 7 children. Katie's children were ages 6 to 19, and by this time, Alick's children were ages 16 to 33. Alick and Katie would have 4 more children together: Harlan, Herman, Ceola, and Irene. Katie's daughter, Lena Pelfrey, would marry Alick Porter's grandson, Reese, the son of Went Porter. Opal Everman speaks with her niece, Eleanor Short, in 1996 about her grandpa, Alick Porter.
Well, we didn't like Grandpa Porter.
You didn't care for great-grandpa?
Not a bit, but we loved Grandpa Manning. Grandpa was good to us or something, but and now that I'm older, I can understand. He had children the same age of us, of his own. Naturally, he didn't have the affection for the grandchildren he did for his own, and we couldn't understand that.
Yeah.
Another of Alick's grandchildren, Dixie Manning, the daughter of Charlie Porter, recently told of spending many nights at her grandpa Alick Porter's house with her Aunt Irene, who was her same age. Dixie said her grandpa was funny. She relayed the story of how Dixie and her sister and Irene were in bed together at Grandpa's and they were raising a ruckus. Grandpa Alick came in and he just said, "Calm down, girls." Dixie says if it had been her dad coming into the room, they would have got a good spanking. Irma Lewis, Went's daughter, shares a humorous story about Alick and Katie.
They lived across the creek.
Grandma, this car.
Did they ever tell you about one time they'd been down at the post office or somewhere and the creek got up and they started back home and Kate was big and fat and he was slender, you know.
Yeah.
And he told her to get on his back and he'd carry across that creek and he fell in with, they both fell in, got as wet as they could be.
Glenna Gearhart, the daughter of Molly Flannery, who was a daughter of Reverend Steve Porter, Alick's brother, had fond memories of her great-uncle, Alick Porter, at the old Fairview Church.
And Uncle Alick was always such a good, stable person in the church to explain the Bible in the Bible class, you know.
Oh, he was?
He was always good on knowing and explaining what the scriptures meant in the Bible class.
Oh, yeah?
And I always remembered him for that.
He was sort of like a teacher.
But he'd be a member of the class if he wasn't the teacher. Maybe he was a teacher. I guess he was.
Huh.
Because I can remember he'd always have such a good explanation for what scriptures meant, you know.
Yeah.
When we talk about it in Sunday school.
Your grandpa was a blacksmith, huh?
Yeah, he shot horses. I guess that's what killed him.
That's what killed him?
Yeah. 8 years before he died, he took some kind of spasms.
Yeah.
And the doctor said it was a drop of blood that would hit his brain and throw him into a spasm.
I didn't know.
And for 8 years he took in. And everybody thought it was straining, you know, shooing them horses and all.
Yeah.
Caused it. But I don't know if it did or not.
Huh.
Alick and Katie wrote their will on October 7th, 1925. This stirred up quite a controversy on both sides of their family. Since Katie had 7 older children from her first marriage, and Alick did also, they decided to leave everything to just their last 3 children, Harlan, Herman, and Irene, who were 20 years old and younger at the time of Alick's death. Alick's first set of children were ages 36 to 53 at the time of his death. However, some of Alick's older boys felt like they should not be left out. So they talked of getting a lawyer and trying to fight their dad's will, but they were advised that they had a losing battle. Katie's dad, who outlived Alick by over 3 years, was so upset with their decision that he chose to leave nothing to Katie or any of her children from her first or second marriage, and to give it all to his other daughter. This is a picture of Alick and Katie with their youngest children, Herman and Irene, with Katie's dad, James Coffey, and Katie's stepmother. I only met Alick Porter's daughter, Arabelle, once when I was about 10 years old. At that age, I wasn't interested in talking to old people, but fortunately, in 1969, my Uncle Ed Porter recorded his visit with Aunt Arabelle, and my dad, Don Porter, also filmed her about the same time. In this rare audio clip, she talks about her dad, Alick Porter, at the end of his life and his funeral.
Poor Dad, he says he'd always said he liked home, and said that one night when he was bad sick, but he was in his right mind at that time, he said, if the Lord calls, now I'm ready to go.
Praise God for that.
You
No, I didn't get to go.
to preach the book. The wonderful preachers came that day, they ever heard him. Charlie said he did. And I've heard several say it was just like a camp meeting. Arnie, Gay, and Senia Erwin's little girl, they sang Fly Away. That was his favorite song. Yeah. Charlie Van Sant, and Harlan Porter, and Dear Eyes, who sang it was his favorite song, too. I forgot what it was. It didn't seem like a funeral. And I said to my nephew, I said, Brother Van Sant preached, he said the best day of it, and I couldn't hear it, she did. And he said, well, I said he had something to preach from.
Amen, that's true, that's right, yeah.
That's all. He told about how Dad liked children and how he worked for the orphan's home. He would get out and beg money for the orphan's home, and would, if he got so he wasn't able to get out and get money, he'd send his own money. Oh, he told how when he was converted in 1907 out at the old Fairview Church. And he knew him all his life. He preached there, they said, an awful good sermon.
Alexander F. Porter died on August 7, 1928, at Baptist General Hospital in Ashland, Kentucky, after an operation 5 days earlier. He was buried August 9th at Fairview Cemetery. Alick's widow, Katie, and their 3 children, Harlan, Herman, and Irene, are pictured here at his grave. This picture of third wife Katie with Alick's children was probably taken after 1929, when Alick's son Millard was killed in a mine accident. Katie continued to live in the home place and eventually with her son Herman and his wife May. Katie was known as a midwife, and she delivered several babies in the area. My grandparents, Everett and Grace Porter, would write to Katie and let her know when they were coming to visit, and she would always have sweets made for the kids. One time they decided to visit her at the last minute without writing ahead, so Katie didn't have any cookies, pies, or cake for them when they arrived. It was a long drive for them through the creek beds from Porter Creek back to Globe, so Katie convinced them to stay for a meal. My dad, Don Porter, was just a boy at the time. He had been expecting something special on Kate's dinner table. As they sat down for dinner, he rudely complained, "I don't want that old stuff. We can have that at home." I hope my grandpa took him outside for an attitude adjustment. Kate passed away in 1957, outliving Alick by nearly 30 years. 2 scriptures come to mind for the life of Alick Porter from the book of Proverbs. Proverbs 22:6, "Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old he will not depart from it." Alick Porter faced some hardships in his life, and he didn't always do the right thing. However, as a mature man, he came back to his spiritual roots that had been planted in his heart as a boy by his Methodist preacher father and a loving mother. The other verse that comes to my mind is Proverbs 18:22. "He who finds a wife finds a good thing."